Myers, part of the Inner Resilience Network. And he's going to be doing the tech stuff, and he might chime in here and there, especially will be helping us with the dialogue. And Ayako is part of the Social Justice Working Group, and she's been both a speaker in this series and also helping organize it. So really great. And of course, we're going to introduce Scott, who is also in the Inner Resilience Network, more deeply a little bit later. But that's your crew today, your ground crew. So this is, we're going to begin this actually with a little bit of a grounding and a somatic meditation, just to get in our bodies and get present, and then we'll launch into just a little bit overview of the Building Bridges series and what we're doing here and how we're continuing and what we've harvested so far. Maybe hear a little bit from some of you, and then we'll introduce Scott and hear his what he has to share about the restorative justice practice and what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to be having some really deep dialogue after that. So we have quite a bit of a chunk of time for sharing. We're going to do probably do breakout groups so that everybody gets a chance to see about the stuff we'll be talking about. So so that's the overview. And but let's go ahead and just get grounded a little first. Somatic process that just really brings us into our bodies. So I just invite you all to feel your feet flat on the floor if you can, if you're in a place where you can do that. And close your eyes. Just taking a nice breath, a nice deep breath, and feeling that breath going all the way down into your belly. Feeling that breath, just filling your belly all the way to the bottom of your belly. Nice and easy and soft. Full breath. And just we'll take a few of those nice, full, deep breaths. Feeling the weight of your body on the chair, on the floor, wherever you are. Feeling the fullness of your breath. Just really coming into your body, becoming really, really present with what your body is feeling right now. Whatever that is, just notice it. As you're breathing deeply and fully, you might notice some tension somewhere. You may notice even some pain, or maybe some place that feels really good. Whatever it is, just witness, just notice. Nice, easy breaths, feeling fully present with your body, with who you are in this body, your experience of life in this body, just as it is right now. Feeling your presence really coming in, your awareness, the fullness of you, really inhabiting your body. Noticing again your full breath and the weight of your body on the floor, on the chair. Noticing any tension and allowing it to be what it is. Breathing in. And consciously setting aside anything that you might have been doing before you got to this call. Anything your mind might be still working on. And then we just it'll be there when we're done. So just taking a moment to just consciously set all that aside so we can be fully present with each other here today in this healing time, in this sacred time, and really setting this space as a sacred space for us to connect and to share. We'll take one more breath, and this next breath, just imagine that breath coming up to your heart and feeling your heart. All right. So whenever you're ready, feeling your breath, you can also open your eyes and return to the room with us. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the Building Bridges. This is our fifth this year, fifth in the series. We have done 4 this spring, and last fall we did 3 dialogues. So we are just warming up. We're really just warming up. We've had a lot of amazing discussions, and I, for one, have more questions than answers. A lot of interesting insights that have opened my mind in different directions around the subjects that we've been looking at. Last fall, we were looking more, it was much more dialogue oriented. Who are we? Who are we together? How do we connect to the greater whole? Were the themes of those discussions. And then this spring, we began the series with talking about what is climate justice, making the connection between social justice and climate change, and noticing that it's still something that a lot of people are learning about, that aren't quite sure about those connections. So we're going to continue to build our sharing around that, and inquiry around the deep connection between climate change and social justice, and why it's so incredibly important to talk about them together and not just have social justice be something that's off on the side. Because we all know that transition's been very involved with climate change related activities. So the first one was that, and we had a social justice group sharing about that, Aya and Marissa and a few others. And then our next one was on historical trauma, and we invited Pat McCabe and Bayo Akamalafe and Alesa Miles, who is in our social justice working group. And we had a really, really amazing discussion on trauma that is a big subject. So it sort of just barely touched it, but it opened the ground. And then our next discussion was on, I'm blanking. Galen, what was the next one? Or Aya, you were in that one.
Was it the one with Pat McCabe? And
yeah.
It was about allyship, Nicole Wires.
That was the last one.
Was it
Privilege.
unpacking privilege? Yes.
We were
Sorry, I just
talking about
looked it up.
privilege. It's a subject that is a very difficult. See how I blanked it out? Yeah, that was a very provocative topic, and I think we'll have more of those topics like that related to that. And then and that was with bio, and then the next one was on being an ally, and that was with Pat McCabe and Nicole Wires, and that was pretty incredible too. So we've had a lot of great things were said, but I know that there were some questions still, and there are also some kind of curiosities about some things that were said that maybe, you know, we don't agree with, and that's okay. That's part of this whole thing. There's not a right or wrong. And it's all about the discussion. It's all about the dialogue. It's not about getting it right. I want to be super clear about that. And it's also about being okay to ask questions that might seem obvious, or you might think they're dumb or something, or that you might feel like they're going to be politically incorrect, or who knows what. But it's because we do have this, you know, shaming culture. There's some call out culture in the social justice world that may not be so helpful. And so we really want a space that is okay to be messy, okay to ask questions, okay to learn and disagree, because that's how we heal together, and that's how we grow and how we go forward in this you know, in this society, not by getting stuck in militantness about how things should be. So this is a huge subject about race and equity. So it's going to be ongoing. We're going to keep going with this series because, like I said, we're just warming up, and I feel like I know less and less as I go, which maybe is a good thing. But yeah, so do you have anything to chime in there, Galen or Aya, around what we've done, and anything that you want to add to that?
I just want to say I added to the chat here a link to our Google Doc, the Building Bridges Shared Space Doc, and that will have little notes and sometimes summaries of the discussions that you were just speaking about, Jewel. So everyone can check out that there, and it's also a space to add your own thoughts and reflections as well.
Excellent. And you can see all the different discussions we've had in that share doc. You can go scroll up. The top is the first one, and the bottom is this one. So if you want to go back and see it's not real organized. Well, maybe you organized it, Galen. I haven't looked at it recently, but it's just kind of more of a stream of consciousness of notes and things that we've talked about. So Aya, would you like to just share a little bit more about climate justice and the building bridges and why it's so important that we're
Sure.
doing it?
I just want to touch upon the relevance of today's conversation with the frame, you know, the dialogue that's in the mainstream right now, which is how to support Black lives. And I do think that restorative justice is one of the solutions that can replace the police violence. And I do think it's what Scott's going to be talking about is really a healing act. And to the extent that so many of us who are identify as people of color cannot separate out our injustices that we experience in the environment from the injustices that we experience because of our skin color. I do this work, and it, it is a matter of privilege that I can live far away from pollution. It's an economic privilege that impacts, a couple of races predominantly. So I just want to hold the kind of the connection between this moment and what we're about to talk about. And thank you for being here. And I do believe it is a sacred conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I like
Marilyn
that.
has her hand.
Oh. I'm going to take questions in just a second. Do you have is it something related to anything we just said, or is it a quick question?
You're muted.
Okay. If it's a comment, let's save it for a little later when we're going to have more dialogue. But if it's a quick question, go for it. I'll
Who
unmute.
is it that's wanting to talk?
There we go.
Scott's uncle, my brother, and his mother, Stephanie. Larry Flint and Stephanie have just joined. So we have more of Scott's family here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm done.
All right. Okay. So yes, it's a sacred conversation. It really is. This is sacred work. The idea of bringing social justice together with the inner resilience is because we recognize the sacred work, and that the ills in our system, our system is broken, and it needs healing. We need cultural healing, social healing, besides the personal healing, and so they go hand in hand. The social justice work and the inner work, because for us to have cultural healing, and for us to, if we really want to change the system, we do have to change within ourselves as well, and how we see things, and how we our perceptions, so much around it. It goes very, very deep, and we know that we have all kinds of competing narratives today in the world. A war of ideologies, if you will. So it makes a big difference how we see the world. And so that's the work that we're doing here, is just really crafting a healing narrative and social healing. So I'd like to we're gonna just kind of take a little, container here and just hold a couple questions that are really alive for people. Before I introduce Scott and he's going to talk about his work, we're not going to go into the questions themselves. We're going to have a dialogue about the process, but I just want to be able to shine a light on the kinds of questions that we're asking ourselves and each other, and know that we will come back to those questions. We're going to record them at another dialogue. But I want people to have a chance to just say what's alive for them. And if you could just do it in a question form, and if there's a chance to talk deeper about it at the end, we might have some time. So if you just have, and we won't be able to get to everybody, we just have a few minutes for this part, but I just wanted to just kind of open the space for a little bit of reflection on the building bridges so far, for those that have gone to any of the events, and any questions that are really alive for them right now. So go ahead and unmute yourself, or raise your hand, and I'll unmute you, and we'll see what's up for people.
And just a little technical point here. If anybody is on the phone and they'd like to unmute themselves, it is *6.
Okay, Marilyn, you have a question? I'll unmute you. You're not, you're still, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to ask all of you for any ideas you have about how we can help the children who are victims of racism heal. After Martin Luther King was killed, I taught a class in San Francisco, in a Black class, and their stories of what it's like to be a little child and have a carload of teenage boys try to run them down on the sidewalk or throw rocks at them, screaming, "Let's kill niggers." It broke their hearts, and it broke my heart. And this is what even tiny children are going through. So any input anybody has about how we can help our children heal, I would like to hear, because it breaks my heart every time I think about it.
Thank you. That's a great thing for the shared doc space. So inviting people to write any responses to Marilyn in the shared doc space around that. Anybody else?
That in the chat.
Hi, Theo. Go for it.
Just sort of direct response to the last one. I feel like one of the most important things we can do as white allies is to have, solidarity, the solidarity with Black faces, treating history accurately. I mean, that's something we can give to young kids. Be like, there's some of the adults in the room are making these changes. Hang out, stick with us. We're going to make the world better for you. That's what I would say to the young. He's back.
Thank you.
I forgot to say in my little spiel that I just learned that the last emancipation, the last person that was emancipated, they were emancipated 155 years ago, Friday, Juneteenth. So it's not that far away from where we sit time-wise. And that just, I didn't realize it was so recent. And it just explained everything. I just kind of sat with it. And in terms of what we can do, I think it's just, I have trouble talking to people who, show bigotry. I just get really angry. But if you can hold patience with people that have that reaction to the world, I feel like they must carry so much trauma within them. Something must have happened that makes them hate that much, hate people that they've never met. I don't begin to comprehend it, that hate, but if you can talk to them, I think that would help us.
Yes. Just showing simple caring and talking to people, I think, is the way we're gonna, ultimately, I think the only way we're gonna shift this stuff. Small things matter. Yeah, Shaktari, you have a question.
I was going to respond to that. Is this not the time?
Well, it looks like it's opened up something, but we're going to have more dialogue later, but if it's quick, go for it.
That's okay. I can wait also, so that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, and also the shared doc is meant for this kind of thing so that we can catch the thoughts while we're thinking of them, because it's really, sometimes we just really want to say something and you can put it right there and then we may get to it live later. So, but I do want to get to, you thought of it?
Just on what you just said then, because I'm at the dock and I'm trying to find the spot for today's comments, and it's, where do we go?
All the way down.
So on the left side, you'll see in the outline, Healing Justice.
And so where do we go? Which section?
So there's just a space right under the title, Healing Justice, and the date, and you can fill it in right here.
Thank you. That's what I didn't know. Thank you.
So I think it's page 41.
It is. Yeah. It is. I just went there. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Thanks for joining us there.
All right. Well, we've got, that's a live question. It seems like it's up, like how our kids, how do we do this going forward? So let's make sure we bookmark that subject, because that is a really important topic. And I don't want to just move on without really making sure we get that recorded. But I do need to, for timing's sake, move on to introducing Scott and the topic for today. We really felt like this was a very important subject, and Scott's work is just so important for those of you who know about restorative justice, and those of you that don't, you will be hearing about it. It is the social healing. One comment I'll say before I tell you a little bit about Scott. I've been reading this book called Race and Restorative Justice, and I highly recommend it. And they talk about how indigenous practices, a lot of indigenous cultures don't even have words or terms for prison or police. They have these restorative practices built into their culture. And it's interesting, the culture we live in that is so opposite to that. And what we're dealing with now with the police and the polarization in our system. So what Scott's going to be offering is a method for how we can begin to heal and shift the system that we're in, this polarized system. So Scott is, he is a a wonderful guy. I'm bringing up your bio here, Scott, because I didn't have it memorized. There it is. He's a visionary peacemaker, transpersonal psychologist, and life relationship coach. He guides individuals and groups into the deepest levels of personal and collective healing and resilience. His integrated approach brings together psychology, spirituality, nature-based healing, and transformational activism. He is a leading advocate for bringing the principles and practices of restorative justice to bear on the full range of social issues. And he is the author of Active Peace, A Mindful Path to a Nonviolent World. He is also a core member of the Inner Resilience Network and is offering a series on conflict transformation, and is actually going to be doing one tomorrow. We'll be announcing that at the end. So welcome, Scott. I'm so glad that you're here, and I am going to hand the mic over to you.
Thank you, Jewel. I'm going to set a timer for 19 minutes. Does that still sound good? All right. So I want to start by just appreciating the Building Bridges initiative, Jewel and Galen and Aya and anyone else that was involved in the inception of that. I'm such a believer in that the issues are not separate. That's so key for me. And I think everything that's been said in support of restorative justice and healing justice, it's like kind of promising a lot. But I think it is true that I think you'll find this very relevant to whatever is close to your heart in terms of the issues or the whole package, if that's how you think about things. I wanted to start with just a little bit about my background as it relates to restorative justice and the approach to it that I've chosen. I started out as an environmental activist. So I started out with the Greenpeace Toxics campaign, and I did that for about 6 years. And then I went to Idaho and I did conservation work with the Idaho Conservation League on mining issues and lobbying for wolves and wilderness in a very conservative political climate. And I did environmental work in Canada. And then I got my wake-up call. I got married in Canada, in Nova Scotia. I got divorced in Nova Scotia. And it was kind of a low point in my life, personally and professionally. I was burning out on the us versus them approach to activism. And so I knew between those two things, it was my time. So I found a peacemaker training in Boulder, Colorado, that I decided had my name on it. And so I moved to Boulder. I didn't know anyone in Boulder, but I decided to move to Boulder to do that training. And my main mentor there was a guy named Fleet Mall, who's a Buddhist peacemaker. And he was keen on restorative justice. And he recommended to me at some point that I get involved in that. So I just thought it would be another thing, to do. I was really just full-time studying and training And I got involved in 2 different programs here in Colorado. I've had very good mentors, and I ended up running the program for the Boulder County Sheriff's Office for a while, their Restorative Justice program. But I always brought my activist lens to that work. And I felt that the principles and practices are too good to be limited to anything, that they can be used to address the full range of challenging issues that we face. And so that's why I have become an advocate for taking it out of the box, out of the criminal justice system, and empowering communities with the principles and practices. So that's a lot of what I'm about these days. And next I want to clarify some terms, because I think this can be very helpful. And I'll start with restorative justice, which probably doesn't need a lot of clarification for people. You've likely heard something about it. It tends to play out within the criminal justice system as one option, sometimes for some people, limited option in places that have programs like Boulder, City of Boulder, Boulder County, more and more communities, and even at the state level, restorative justice is being promoted. It was mentioned that the roots, well, maybe this wasn't specifically stated, but the roots of it are indigenous, right? So before jails and prisons, people had their own approaches to healing harm. Always been harm, there always will be harm. So that's restorative justice. Healing justice is a phrase that I tend to prefer when I'm talking about empowering the community with the principles and practices of restorative justice. It has a more transformational flavor. You will also hear the phrase transformational justice. So healing justice just feels like a bigger umbrella, more transformational. And active peace circles, which is my specific approach that I teach to healing justice, takes the best of restorative justice, but empowers communities with those tools so that we can address all of the harm that isn't going to be addressed any other way. So that we could come together as communities and have civil, respectful conversations about how do we grapple with climate change today? How do we grapple with this call to phase out the police force for a huge swath of what has been their mandate, but where it's so widely recognized that they're not the best trained people to do that, that we need civilian groups of people to come in. Well, here's a way to approach conversations like that. And so the main distinctions between active peace circles and restorative justice are that because it's community-led, we can make it as deep as we want, as transformational as we want. We can go as slow as we need to go. We can talk about systems change and root causes. And that's all very much built into the process because that's important, talking about systems change. Community-led, I already mentioned that. Those are the main distinctions, and there's so much room for creativity. You know, it will be the local people who really decide, you know, who's going to be in the circle, what are the issues, how do we approach it, how slow do we need to go, how much can we bring in mindfulness and embodiment and our full selves, because this is such deep work that we're preparing to do. So it's just, I find it really juicy. And I love having opportunities like this to talk about it. So Galen, I think I want to go right to that principles document.
Okay, I'll bring that up on the screen.
So I've put together a list of principles for active peace circles specifically, and I thought I would go through those with you and point out where it's just really consistent with restorative justice and where it goes a little deeper. So will we all be looking at that document?
Yeah, that's
shortly.
on the
Okay.
screen right now.
All right, there we go.
Is this the right one?
That's it. Yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's the other one. Yeah, that's the one. So I've got these principles, and so we'll just go through them really quickly. And I really want to invite you to feel the energy that's here, because today we're not going to be able to do a really deep dive into the process. The main thing is to get a sense for there's an energy here. There's a transformational intention. There's a deep nonviolence. So participation is always voluntary. It's the same with restorative justice. We appeal to the basic dignity and the universal needs of all people. Restorative justice does that, but we have to go deeper into that and make it more front and center because of the depth of the work that we're doing. Do not re-victimize. That's clearly a part of restorative justice and also a part of this process. Creating the conditions for safety and being trauma informed. Here more than with restorative justice, because of the depth of what we can do with this process, revolves around the 5 R's of restorative justice. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But just feel the energy of those 5 R's: respect, responsibility, relationship, repair, and reintegration. Respect is really the gateway, so I put that first. And we know how hard that is. This is unconditional respect, right? We know how hard that is with people who have different worldviews, different experiences. The willingness to take responsibility is front and center. Process is based on repair and healing. And we're healing in this work, active peace circles, we're healing the root causes of disrespect and violence. The belief that we're separate, right? We're healing the root causes of disrespect and violence. We're healing the illusion that we're separate through the direct experience of interrelatedness in the process of addressing this harm and healing it. And we move forward knowing there's no guaranteed outcome. And we trust the wisdom of the circle. Let's take a look at that other document really quick, Galen. So I just wanted to offer you the basic stages. And it really starts with cultivating that restorative mindset in ourselves and in the other people that will be involved. So that means respect and taking responsibility for what's ours to take responsibility for. Prioritizing the relationships. I'm in point number 2 here, the 5 R's of restorative justice. This really gives the process the center that it revolves around. So it's the same in restorative justice as with active peace circles. Prioritizing relationships. We're all about repairing the harm. And then reintegration is our ultimate litmus test. So what that means is if we've had our circles, if there's been repair, then we simply ask people, has the harm been fully repaired? Do you feel like you can reintegrate back into the community without lingering blame, shame, or resentment? If we can meet that standard, then we can reintegrate back into the community, and we can safely say we've done a good job of repairing the harm in this case. So it really sets the bar high, and that's where it needs to be for this. Again, we create the conditions that bring out the best in people. I think the 5 R's do that. They really hold the container. It's very honest and real. And so we have to create the conditions for that. We're coming together across divisions. We're bridging divisions to strengthen the community and bring about fundamental changes in thinking and behavior. That's the thing here that is so valuable now, is changing hearts and minds and setting the stage for ongoing dialogue. So the restorative mindset is the first stage. The other stages are the preparation and enrollment. So preparing people to be involved in the circle, getting them to agree to be in the circle voluntarily. Then there's the circle process itself. It can be more than one circle. Often it will need to be if we're talking about police violence, if somebody's been killed, if we're talking about climate disruption. There's all kinds of big issues we can address, and we don't have to have artificial time frames. Then there's implementation. If we've had our circle, if there's been agreements to repair the harm, here's what's going to happen. Here's what I'm going to do to repair the harm by this date. That's the implementation phase. Then that gets done, and there's some accountability. And we want to be able to measure our results, because we're looking for systems change. So we need results that are really measurable and concrete. And then there's reintegration. If we've really done the work of repair, then we can come together one more time and acknowledge that and say, okay, we're basically done. It's time to move on. It may not be 100%, if somebody's been killed, if it's the BP oil spill, which I use this model in my book, applying it to the BP oil spill, there's no getting back to before, but we can do what we can do to repair the harm. And sometimes healing the harm is going to be a better word than repair. So I think that's it for the documents, Galen. I know I don't have a lot more time left, so I just want to say quickly a little more about some of the issues that could be addressed this way. So the issue that Marilyn mentioned with the young kids subject to racism really reminds me of hearing on Juneteenth, being educated about that occasion as a person of privilege who was never educated about that. I heard from a woman in Tulsa, Oklahoma, whose brother was killed by police. I think it was about 4 years ago. That police officer was acquitted. So 4 years later, no accountability, no healing. And that example is so tragically common. Who is going to heal that harm? Do we just say it's too late? Do we just accept the resentments and the sadness, the tension of that in the community? That's the kind of issue that could be addressed with a process like this. This is basically our homegrown version of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process that happened in South Africa. So everything from that, from the BP oil spill, from climate disruption, to taking these principles and practices and using them to repair harm in our groups, you know, where there's conflict. You know, conflict transformation is so much up right now in our society, as it should be. You know, it's really time we normalized conflict and came up with some grown-up ways to deal with it. And it's challenging territory. So this is why groups like the Inner Resilience Network of Transition US are so key. That's why I always make the point that this is deep nonviolence. This is a commitment. Okay, I have a minute left. It's a pretty big commitment.
Scott, take the time that you need. Don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I often think of Gandhi, who with his core cadre of nonviolent activists spent 11 years in an ashram preparing for the batons, preparing for the beatings. They didn't just decide to do it one day. They knew it was going to require preparation. So for him, self-purification was the primary aspect of nonviolence. He called it self-purification. Martin Luther King called it personal commitment. And that was the prayer and the gospel music and the Bible and the community. You know, that's, and both, you know, Gandhi, King, they had a deep spiritual practice. It was transpersonal for them. And we're in the territory here of moving beyond our egos, beyond the personal. So that's what I love about this work. It's as deep as we want to go. And I see some things in the chat that I'm not looking at. Galen, can you facilitate that? Is there something, and do you want me to take some time to address questions or what's in the chat, or do we want to move on?
It's just
I feel pretty complete, and I just want to say thank you. That was a pretty quick tour, but I really appreciate the opportunity to. There's opportunities to go deeper, certainly, and I will bring those out too. But thank you for listening to that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So I would like to direct folks to think about a question and place it into the chat. But first, if there's anything Jewel or Aya want to add, or if there's any thoughts alive before we go into that, we can create a couple minutes of space here for that.
Yeah, I would just say that I could listen to you, Scott, talk about this for a lot longer. So I was feeling a little selfish when I said take all the time you need, but I also am looking forward to the dialogue. It's just powerful. And I will make one comment because I think this is important. You talked about how it's a lifestyle. It's not just a practice. It's a way of doing our lives.
I had a question, I guess, maybe for Scott. You mentioned that you ran a program at the police station, and I'm curious to know about specific examples where this model replaced, you know, a traditional model at a police station and how it played out?
That's a really good question. So I volunteered for the Boulder County Sheriff's Office program, and then that's the program I ran for a while. So it's fairly typical in a restorative justice program like that, that the cases that come are very minor. So it's a lot of juveniles, it's a lot of first-time offenses, and it requires, there's what's the word? Discretion on the part of the officer. So if it's a nice white kid, you know, never been in trouble, is willing to take some responsibility for what they did, then that would be seen as a case that could go to restorative justice instead of getting a ticket or going to court. I didn't always work with youth, but it was usually pretty minor stuff. And that's okay as a starting point, you know, in a community. Let's start with that, but let's ramp it up really fast here, because, you know, the court system, the jail system, the prison system, they're not serving us. And the recidivism rate is well known to be a fraction with people who go through restorative justice, a fraction of what it is with people who don't, who go to jail. And the financial savings are tremendous too. So that's why we need to bring it out of the box. And you know, I called this webinar I just did Restorative Justice Unleashed. You know, let's unleash the beauty of this practice. And it brings us kind of full circle back to the way the indigenous people did it, right? Where you could really involve the community, and you could they were in indigenous communities, they are dealing with generational sexual abuse in a restorative way. That's not a quick fix, right? So they understand that this will take years, and this will take a lot of support. Let's let it take years, and let's give it a lot of support if that's what's needed.
Hey, well, we're definitely going to be doing more dialogues using this process. So I'm looking forward to that. But right now, shall we give people a taste, Scott, and do a dialogue process? What do you think, Galen and Scott?
Yeah, I think that's great. I'd love to just sort of start where I accidentally prematurely put the question into the chat, but I'm going to put it again into the chat now. And I'd love everybody here to take a moment and think about a brief response to this question: what motivates me to learn about or to be a force for healing justice? And go ahead and put your response into the chat here. And we'll spend a couple of minutes as a big group discussing that before we go into a breakout group to have a more interactive discussion.
So shall we say the question out loud? What motivates me to learn about and be a force for healing justice? So the chat or the shared doc also is, you have more thoughts? Or maybe we're ready to go right into the dialogue, the breakout groups. What do you think, Galen? You're going to give us another minute?
Yeah, just another minute or two. And I see Marilyn, you have something there? You'll have to unmute yourself.
She wrote, "I'm motivated by healing children as I saw happening in my classroom."
She also has put up above that she had a story. Maybe when, as people are putting their comments in the chat, Marilyn could share her story.
Yeah, she could share it in the chat or the shared doc, or maybe if it in the breakout groups when we go into that.
Which do you want? I'm willing to do whatever.
Okay.
Shall I quickly tell now while people are writing?
Put it in the chat.
I did.
Okay.
Well, briefly, I said that's what I'm motivated by.
Excellent.
Healing the children as I saw happening in my classroom with the Black kids in San Francisco after King was killed. Do you want a quick version of that while people are writing? I don't want to take up too much time, but it was a powerful experience for everybody involved.
Wonderful. Well, I think maybe the breakout discussion will be a great place for that. If you want to hold on to that, we'll get into those in just a couple minutes. And so I'm finishing up my response here. It looks like there's still a couple of responses coming in. So in just a minute, we'll go through. We'll see if anybody wants to read these responses out loud, and then we'll have plenty of time in the breakout room. We have some more questions.
Great, and we'll harvest all this and put it in the shared doc for people, so you can always refer back to see what people said. But maybe we should go into the breakout. What do you think, Galen? And are we taking this question, this particular question?
So we have 3 questions that. So I was just going to give folks, if anybody wanted to sort of read what they had out loud here in the main group. Is there anybody that's drawn to share their response they put in the chat just now?
Yeah, I being a lawyer, you know, I've always questioned the judicial system in the adversarial system. I don't agree with, and I don't agree with the judge coming in and solving problems without more community input. Judges aren't God. They're human, you know, and I think it's harmful actually to the actual healing process. The judge just gets in the way of it, and it should be changed. And that I came to that realization when I studied restorative justice. So I'm excited to learn the actual healing as opposed to the supposed one.
Awesome, thank you. So I think we'll have time for maybe one more. Does anybody want to read or share what they put in to the chat just now? And I'll just share really briefly. I'm really excited about the bottom-up approach, and from a self-sufficiency point of view, communities really learning to take responsibility for our own processes and not outsourcing it to institutions and not depending on others to solve our problems for us. So it's really a community learning process, and it's part of the evolution of collective intelligence. And so I'm really excited about that. All right, well, so we have another collection. We have 3 questions that we'd like to have people address in their own way, however is alive for us in the groups. We're going to go into groups of about 3 to 4 people in the breakout rooms. And, you know, if you want to focus on one question, if you want to dabble with all 3 of them, however it arises organically, or if the conversation goes elsewhere, feel free. But these questions will be there as a backbone for us all. And I'll put them in the chat once we're into our breakout rooms. And so we'll go ahead and do that. It looks like, Jewel, maybe you have to do that from your end?
The breakout rooms?
Yeah.
Okay, so should we read off the questions though that we're going to be going in so everybody's clear on them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And then we'll have them. I'll copy and we can all have them in the shared doc too. Refer to them.
Yeah, so here they are in the chat now.
Okay. What inspires me about the 5 R's of restorative justice? What are my challenges in embodying the restorative mindset? And what is my commitment to the restorative mindset? So we'll take these into the chat. I'm going to put them in the shared doc. And we're going to
maybe just right before that, just in terms, because of the references to the restorative mindset, what I would invite you to think about there is those R's of restorative justice: respect, responsibility, prioritizing relationship, just the non-violence of it, the energy that comes with this process, the healing energy beyond the comfort zone of our ego and our habitual patterns, if that's helpful.
Awesome. All right, so I have to do the breakout groups, Galen? You can't?
Yeah, apparently I don't have those controls.
Ah.
So you can just set up for 3 people, and then it'll do 3 or 4 or so in each room.
Okay, just give me a minute because I was thinking we're going to do it, so I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't make sure that I had those controls before we started.
There we go. Breakout rooms. All right. There we go. Here we go. We have 20 minutes.